The weapons were buried under 3 feet of river silt and a collapsed willow root, and Abel Hayes almost missed them entirely. He had been waist-deep in the shallows of the Greyvane crossing, trying to free a wagon wheel from a submerged rock, when his boot struck something solid and unmistakably deliberate, wrapped in oilcloth, heavy as a dead man, and tied with a cord that had not rotted. He pulled it free with both hands and nearly fell backward into the current. The Greyvane ran cold even in high summer, and the bundle splashed water all down his front when he hauled it up onto the bank. The other caravan guards watched from the ferry platform, uninterested now that it was clearly not treasure, and old Davin the ferryman called out that they were burning daylight and the toll did not include a salvage fee. Abel unwrapped one corner of the oilcloth anyway. He saw iron and green lacquered bone. He saw a hatchet head with Orcish runes pressed into the spine. He saw the wrapped handle of a short blade, and beneath it the folded bulk of something that felt like chainmail of a very particular make, small rings, tight weave, the kind that Orcish smiths called blood iron because they hammered it red before quenching. He rewrapped the bundle fast, before any of the guards could get a good look, and threw it in the back of the supply wagon under 2 sacks of oat flour. He told himself it was not his business. He told himself he would hand it to the town marshal at Millhaven and let someone else sort it out. He did not tell himself the real reason he hid it, which was that whoever had buried this cash had done it with terrified, desperate care, the way people hid the things that mattered most when they had no choice but to run and could not carry everything. He had done the same thing once, long ago, when he was 19, and the debts his father left had meant he could not take his horse, his tools, or much of anything else. He had buried them under the barn floor and promised himself he would come back. He never did. So he kept the bundle quiet, loaded it in the wagon, and rode the last 7 miles to Millhaven with the weight of it sitting in his chest, alongside everything else he usually tried not to think about. Millhaven was not a large town, but it was a crossing town, which meant it was a mean one. It sat at the confluence of the Greyvane and the smaller Ruck, where 3 roads met, and the ferry moved goods north toward the highland markets and south toward the coast. Money moved through Millhaven faster than trust was ever built there. The buildings along the main road were solid enough stone foundations, timber upper floors, canvas awnings over the merchant stalls, but everything had the look of something that expected to be damaged and was braced for it. The sign above the largest tavern, the Doubled Axe, had been repaired so many times that the original wood was barely visible beneath the patches. Abel had worked the Greyvane road for 3 years, since the year he turned 26, hired on with caravan master Pel Dross as a guard, because it paid better than farmhand work, and he was good at looking like he would cause problems for anyone who caused problems first. He was not a large man by any standard that would impress someone at a glance, medium height, lean muscle from years of outdoor work, a face that was honest rather than handsome, with a jaw that needed shaving every other day and brown eyes that people said were calm. He had a scar above his left eyebrow from a bandit's knife 2 summers back. He owned a good sword, a short belt knife, a crossbow that he oiled religiously, and a single change of clothes. He rented a room above the Doubled Axe when the caravan stopped in Millhaven, which was often enough that Marit the innkeeper gave him a slightly better price than she gave strangers. He was not a man anyone looked at twice. That was fine. He had stopped expecting otherwise. He unloaded the caravan at Dross's warehouse on the eastern edge of town, collected his pay 6 silver marks for the 4-day run from Crossfen, and then stood in the warehouse yard for a long moment, looking at the supply wagon, thinking about the bundle still buried under the oat flour. The marshal's office was 50 yards north. He could hand it in and be done by supper. He picked up the bundle instead and carried it to his room. He spent an hour at the small table by the window going through it properly, item by item, laid out on the rough wool of his blanket. 2 hatchets, iron-headed Orcish made, the runes on both spelling something he could not read but recognized as ownership marks. He had seen enough Orcish trade goods to know what personal clan markings looked like. One short sword, 30 inches, single-edged with a wrapped grip of dark leather. One length of blood-iron chainmail, a vest rather than a full shirt, reinforced at the shoulders. One leather belt with 3 empty sheaths still attached. One small wooden box, sealed with wax which he did not open. And beneath all of it, folded small and worn smooth at the creases, a travel document, the kind that border wardens issued in exchange for a toll, and a promise not to cause trouble made out in common script and Orcish pictographs both. The name on it was Murbul Mudborn. The document was dated 9 months ago. The issuing warden's mark was from a checkpoint 300 miles north, near the highland border town of Droskin. Abel sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. 9 months was a long time. Whatever had happened to make someone bury these things and run, it had been 9 months ago and 300 miles from here. The weapons could have washed downriver. They could have been carried and re-hidden. The travel document told him a name but not a story. He folded everything back up. He could still take it to the marshal. He could still be done by supper. He did not go to the marshal. He went to supper, and he took the bundle with him back under the bed, and he told himself he would think about it in the morning. He did not have to wait that long. She found him on the 3rd day. He was on the ferry landing at midday, watching Davin's nephew pole a half-loaded craft across the Greyvane, when he felt the particular stillness that meant someone was looking at him with serious intent. He turned slowly, the way the road had taught him to, without showing urgency. She was standing at the edge of the dock, and his first thought, his very first, before caution or strategy or anything useful, was that she was extraordinary. Murbul Mudborn stood 6 feet and a hard inch, with the broad shoulders and deep chest of someone who had trained for war since she was old enough to hold a blade. Her skin was the dark, burnished green of deep river water in summer, and her tusks, short for an orc, barely an inch past her lower lip, were ivory white and had been carved with thin lines like the rings of a cut tree. Her hair was black and thick, pulled back in a heavy braid that fell to the middle of her back, wound through with a single red cord. Her face was strong-boned and beautiful in the way that things built for a purpose are beautiful: wide jaw, flat broad nose, amber eyes that caught the light like a hawk's and held it. She wore a fitted warrior's vest of deep brown leather, shaped and stitched to her body with the kind of careful craft that meant it was custom-made. The vest was cut short at the midriff and laced up the front with rawhide, revealing the powerful lean muscle of her stomach above the waistband of her close-fitted travel trousers, dark linen, tucked into tall boots that had seen hard miles. A wide belt sat at her hips, and the sheaths on it were empty, which was the detail that caught his attention after everything else had already caught it. She was looking at him with the focused, unimpressed expression of someone who had been tracking something for 3 days and was not surprised to have found it. "You are Abel Hayes," she said. Her voice was low and direct, with the Orcish cadence that moved through consonants like they had weight. It was not a question. "I am," he said. "You found something at the Greyvane crossing," she said, 4 days ago." He held himself very still. "What kind of something?" Her amber eyes moved over him, measuring. "The kind that belongs to me." The dock was not empty. 2 of the doubled axes regulars were sitting on a barrel nearby, and Davin's nephew had poled back and was tying off the ferry. Abel was aware of all of them, and he was aware that an orc woman appearing at the Millhaven ferry landing was the kind of thing that drew attention even when nothing else was happening. "Walk with me," he said. She did not move. "Give me my things and I will walk away. That is simpler." "It is simpler," he agreed. "But your things are in my room at the inn and I do not carry them on my body, so walking with me is how you get them." The amber eyes held him another moment. Something shifted in them, very slightly, not quite softening but adjusting. She had been ready for someone trying to bargain. She had not been ready for someone who was just being practical. "Fine," she said. He led her up from the dock and through the main street, and he felt the town's attention move across her like a cold wind. Millhaven was a crossing town, which meant it had seen orcs before, but seeing did not mean welcoming. He heard someone mutter something behind them. He did not look back. She did not look at anyone, which was the walk of someone who had long since decided that other people's discomfort was their own problem. He unlocked his room and stood back to let her enter first. She stopped just inside the door, and he watched her scan every corner of the room in 2 seconds flat windows, exits, sight lines, before her eyes settled on the bundle on the table. He had brought it out from under the bed that morning because he had known, in the vague way that honest instinct works, that she was close. She crossed the room in 4 strides and put her hands on it, and the change in her was immediate and deeply private. Some rigid thing in her shoulders dropped half an inch. Her breath came out slow and controlled, but it was the breath of someone who had been holding something back for a long time. She unwrapped it. She checked every item quickly and methodically: hatchets, blade, mail vest, belt, box. The box she gripped with both hands and pressed briefly against her chest, eyes closed, before setting it down and checking the seal. "You did not open it," she said. "No," she looked at him. "Why not?" "Because it was not mine," he said. It was the honest answer, and it seemed to surprise her almost as much as his earlier practicality had. She put the belt around her waist and settled the sheaths. She pulled on the mail vest over her leather one, rolling her shoulders until the fit was right. She slid the short sword home in its sheath. The hatchets went on the belt, crossed at her lower back. She picked up the small wooden box and tucked it inside the vest. When she was finished, she turned to face him, and she was someone different, not in herself, but in the way she occupied the room. Before, she had been a woman who had lost something essential. Now she was a warrior who had recovered it. "Thank you," she said, and the words were plain and direct and meant every syllable. "Someone worked hard to hide those," he said. "I did not want them to end up in a marshal's chest somewhere and never be found. Many men would have sold them," she said. "The blood iron alone would have bought a horse." "I am not short of horses," he said, which was a lie, but it made something happen to the corner of her mouth. "You are a caravan guard," she said. "I am not a rich one." "No," she looked at him steadily. "Why did you really keep them safe?" He was quiet for a moment. Through the window, the sound of the river came up, the Greyvane running over stones, the creak of the ferry rope. "Someone buried those like they mattered more than anything," he said finally. "Like they were the last piece of something worth keeping. I have felt that way about things before. It seemed wrong to let it get lost." She was silent for a long moment. The amber eyes were unreadable, but they were paying close attention. "I have tracked you for 3 days," she said. "I expected a fight. I know you came at me like someone ready for one. I usually have to be." "I imagine you do," he said quietly. Another silence. Outside, a cart horse struck the cobblestones going up the hill, and someone shouted at it. "I owe you a debt," she said. "I do not carry debts. You do not owe me anything." "I owe you," she repeated, in a tone that indicated the conversation on that point was finished. "What do you need?" He almost said nothing. The word was right there. He swallowed it and said the honest thing instead. "A drink. I have been thinking about this for 3 days too, and I would not say no to a drink in some company that is not Dross's cargo ledger." That thing happened to the corner of her mouth again, a little more decisively this time. "1 drink," she said. He took her down to the doubled axes common room, and the common room noticed her the way common rooms always noticed orcs. A drop in conversation, a repositioning of bodies, a held breath. Merritt behind the bar watched them come in with an expression that was professional neutrality, painted very carefully over unease. Abel ordered 2 cups of the dark river ale that the doubled axe kept in a special barrel for serious drinkers, and he paid for both without discussion, and he steered them to the corner table by the hearth because it had a wall behind them and a view of the room. She sat with her back to the wall as naturally as breathing. He sat across from her with the room at his back, which he had decided was fine. "Murbul Mudborn," he said. "The travel document had your name. You read it. I read enough to know whose things they were. I did not read beyond that. She regarded him. Murbul is my name. Mudborn is my mother's clan name. We are from the highlands 3 days north of Droskin. You are a long way from home. I am. Her fingers wrapped around the cup. She did not drink immediately. I had reasons to leave. You don't need to explain them to me. I know I do not, she said. I am choosing to. She drank and then she set the cup down and looked at the fire. There was a man killed in my clan 3 seasons ago, a young warrior named Gret. He died badly enough that the blame had to go somewhere, and the men who were actually responsible were better connected than I was. I witnessed what happened. I said what I witnessed. The clan elders decided that my account was mistaken. Abel said nothing. He had heard stories like this before, wearing different names, different faces, different reasons. The mechanism was always the same. I was given a choice, Murbul continued. Recant or leave. Her jaw tightened briefly. I left. But the men who killed Gret, they did not want a witness walking around outside the clan's reach. They put a blood price on me. 300 silver. To anyone who brings them proof I am gone permanently. She said it plainly, but he heard what was underneath it. 9 months of running, of keeping her things buried because having them on her body made her identifiable, of moving from town to town with the knowledge that someone had put a price on her life, and that price was big enough to interest professionals. 300 silver, he said. That would interest professionals. It has, she said. I have dealt with 4 who tried to collect since the spring thaw. The way she said it, matter of fact, tired rather than proud, told him more than any boast would have. She was still alive because she was very good, and because she had not had the luxury of being anything less. The cash at the crossing, he said. You buried it because someone was chasing you. Someone was watching the road. I was moving fast and light and I had to be invisible. My weapons were distinctive. A pause. I was going to come back for them. Then the road stayed watched for 6 weeks and I went south instead, and by the time I doubled back I could not find the cache. The willow had come down in a spring flood. It buried them under a root ball, he said. Another foot of silt on top. I only found them because I was trying to free a wheel. She looked at him again, that measuring, amber look that felt like standing in a current. What are the odds, she said, not quite making it a question. Not good, he said. But here we are. 1 drink became 2, and 2 became 3, and the common room around them had largely settled into its usual noise dice games, a fiddler tuning up near the bar, the smell of the kitchen's mutton stew beginning to assert itself over wood smoke. Nobody bothered them. Abel thought it was about 40% because he was a known regular, and 60% because Murbul looked like someone who would find the interruption unfortunate for whoever attempted it. She was not easy to talk to in the way that some people are easy, warm, and yielding and quick to laugh. She was hard in the way that a river is hard, that will resist being pushed but will carry anything willing to move with it. She said exactly what she meant. She asked questions that were direct enough to be startling. She wanted to know what he thought about things, the blood price system, the Greyvane roads politics, whether he thought the highland Orcish clans would honor the treaty with the valley towns much longer. She listened to his answers with the full weight of her attention, which was more than most people gave him. He found himself talking more than he usually did. He told her about the caravan work, the boredom of most of it, punctuated by the terror of the rare bits where it was not boring. He told her about the crossing town politics, the fact that Millhaven's marshal was a decent enough man but slow to get between commerce and anything that threatened it. He told her about his own sense of the road, which was that it was honest. It gave you what you put into it, no more and no less. You are not what I expected, she said at some point during the 3rd cup. What did you expect? Someone frightened of me, or someone greedy, or someone trying to use the situation to be kind in a way that required something back. Kindness that requires something back is not kindness, he said. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. The firelight was warm on the green of her skin and the ivory of her tusks, and her amber eyes were almost gold in it. He was very aware that she was beautiful in a way he was used to being aware of things he was not going to act on. "I will stay in Millhaven one more night," she said. "Then I move south. There is a trade city called Varan 4 days from here. Enough traffic to disappear in for a while. The road south has 3 bad passes," he said, "and a stretch of riverland near the Ruck's Bend where the Thornback gang has been working the past 2 months. Dross lost a full wagon there in the spring." She looked at him steadily. "I am not undefended." "I know," he said. "I am just telling you what the road is doing." She nodded slowly. "You know it well, 3 years of it." Another pause. The fiddler had started playing something low and wandering. The room had taken on the comfortable blur of a working town's evening. "Would your caravan master hire extra blades?" she said carefully. "For the southern run." He looked at her. "He might," he said. "If the blade was good." "I have killed 4 men who came for my blood price," she said. "I am adequate." He thought about Dross, who was a cautious man but not a foolish one. Dross cared about the merchandise making it to Varan more than he cared about who was carrying a sword beside the wagon. "Come to the warehouse yard tomorrow morning," he said. "I will introduce you." She looked at him for a long moment and then she picked up her cup and finished the last of it. "One condition," she said. "We are clear about what this is. I'm not traveling under anyone's protection. I pull my weight and I make my own choices." "I would not have it any other way," he said. And that was how it started. Dross hired her. She drove a harder bargain than any of his regular guards would have attempted, and she got it 8 silver marks for the 4-day run, the same as his most senior man, because she demonstrated her qualifications by picking up a crossbow bolt that one of the guards was checking for straightness and snapping it neatly in half with 2 fingers, and then looking at Dross with an expression that said the bolt had been crooked anyway and she had done him a favor. Dross hired her. Abel watched the whole thing from the warehouse doorway and had to cover his mouth with his hand. They left Millhaven at first light. 6 guards plus Murbul, 2 drivers, Dross himself on horseback, and 4 loaded wagons heading south on the river road. The Greyvane ran beside them for the first 2 days, broad and gray-green, spanned here and there by stone bridges old enough that no one remembered who had built them. The valley on either side was farmland and water meadow, dotted with mill operations where the farmers ground grain and pulled timber from the highland slopes. It was pastoral and ordinary, and it smelled like cut grass and river mud, and in the morning light, with the mist still hanging in the low places, it was genuinely beautiful. Abel rode point. Murbul took the rear, which was where the most vulnerable part of the formation was. The last wagon carried the medicines and delicate glass goods, the things most worth stealing. After the first hour, he checked back and found her 20 yards behind the wagon, sitting her hired horse with the ease of someone who had been in the saddle since childhood, her eyes moving in a constant, relaxed scan of the road behind them and the tree line on both sides. She caught him looking. She raised one eyebrow slightly, in a way that somehow communicated both acknowledgement and a mild inquiry about whether there was a problem. He shook his head and turned back forward. He heard something that might have been a quiet exhale of amusement from behind him. The first day passed without incident. They camped at a wayfarer's shelter near the second mill crossing, a stone-walled structure with a covered fire pit that the road authority maintained for exactly this kind of use. The guards set up a watch rotation. Murbul volunteered for the 3rd watch, which was the hardest because it ran from 2 hours past midnight to dawn, and when one of the regular guards, a thick-armed man named Cord who had been making pointed comments about their new companion since they left Millhaven, started to say something about whether an orc really had the discipline for a solo watch, Abel spoke first. "Cord," he said, "you remember the caravan out of Crossfen that got hit at the Tallow Mill Bridge last autumn? The one where 4 guards ran and 2 stayed," Cord frowned. "Yeah." "Murbul was one of the 2 who stayed," Abel said. He had no idea whether this was true. He said it with the flat confidence of a man who knows something for a fact. There was a pause. "Is that right?" Cord said, not quite a question. "It is right," Murbul said from across the fire, her amber eyes moving from the flames to Cord with a kind of patient, absolute calm. Cord found something to do on the other side of the camp. When the camp had settled and most of the guards were dozing in their roles, Abel was sitting up on third watch with Murbul. He had taken it too, without explanation, and she said quietly, "I was not at Tallow Mill." "I know," he said. "Seemed more efficient than the alternative." She looked at him sideways. "You lied for me." "I redirected a conversation that was going nowhere useful," he said, another of those almost smiles. "That is a careful distinction. I try to be careful." The fire burned low. The river sounded somewhere below the camp, a steady, uninflected rushing. The stars were thick and cold overhead, and somewhere in the dark an owl was asking its question over and over to no answer. "You did not need to take this watch," she said. "I know." "You do not need to watch out for me," she said. The words were careful but direct. "I am not someone who needs guarding." "I know that too," he said. "I just like this watch. The quiet is better than trying to sleep." She looked at him with those amber eyes in the firelight. "You do not sleep well." It was not a question. He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "Not usually." "Neither do I," she said. And then neither of them said anything for a while, and it was comfortable in the way that silences are comfortable when both people in them would rather be there than anywhere else. On the second day, the road moved away from the Greyvane and crossed into the rougher country, where the valley farms gave way to scrub hillside, and the road narrowed to a single-track lane through outcroppings of gray limestone. This was where the Thornback gang had been working. Abel had said it, and he meant it, and he watched the terrain with his crossbow loaded and his eyes moving. Nothing happened through the morning. At midday, they stopped at a watering point where a spring came out of the hillside into a stone trough, old as the bridges, and the horses drank while the guards ate standing. Murbul came up beside him while he was filling a canteen. She was very closer than she had been in the 2 days of riding, and he could smell the particular warmth of someone who had been working hard in the sun, clean and direct. "The limestone ridge on the east," she said quietly. "There are 3 men in the rocks. They have been pacing us since the hill bend half a mile back." He did not look at the ridge. "How long?" "I picked them up before the bend. They are patient." "Thornbacks," he said. "This is their stretch." "They will wait for the third pass," she said. "After the road drops, less room to run." He considered. He had 6 guards counting her. Dross was not a fighter. The drivers were barely armed. If the Thornbacks had a full crew, which they usually did 8 to 12, with the numbers advantage and terrain on their side, this was going to be ugly unless they did something about it first. "I could go up the ridge," she said. It was not casual. It was a specific offer. He looked at her. "Alone. It is faster alone. 3 men watching a road below them do not expect anything from above. And if there are more than 3, then it becomes more interesting," she said in the tone of someone who found that an acceptable possibility. He thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Take Cord," he said. "He is useful in a clinch despite his mouth, and you should not be alone up there." She looked at him again with that measuring assessment. "You are going to tell me I need backup. I am going to suggest that 2 experienced fighters have a better outcome than 1, even a very good one," he said. "And Cord will do what you tell him if he has any sense." "He has some sense," she allowed. "Underneath. Take him. Go up before the third pass. I will drive the wagon slow and buy you time." She held his gaze for a moment, and something in her expression was slightly different than it had been, a degree of warmth that was new, very restrained but real. "Agreed," she said. What happened at the third pass was the kind of coordinated mess that only becomes a success story in retrospect. The Thornbacks, 8 of them, came down from the roadside rocks exactly where Murbul had predicted. They hit the road in a spread line with cudgels and 2 swords, shouting for the wagons to stop. What they did not account for was Murbul dropping from the ridge onto the 2 men who had been covering the high side, and Cord who, it turned out, had indeed followed her lead with more competence than anyone gave him credit for catching the third from the left flank. The remaining guards on the road reacted fast, and Abel was already moving before the first shout finished echoing. It was over in 4 minutes. 2 of the Thornbacks ran. 3 surrendered. The rest sat on the road and reassessed their life choices. Nobody on the caravan was seriously hurt. Dross stood beside his horse and looked at the situation with the expression of a man doing a cost-benefit calculation in real time, and then said that Murbul's wage would be revised upward for the Varan run. She was wiping her hatchet blade on the grass when Abel found her. She looked up at him with the calm, competent air of someone who had just finished a moderately demanding task. 3 men on the ridge, he said. You were right. I am usually right about terrain, she said. Are you hurt? No. She looked him over anyway, quick, thorough, impersonal in the way that a field medic is impersonal, and then nodded. Good, she said. He looked at her. Are you? A scratch, she said, and she was not minimizing it, merely categorizing it correctly. There was a shallow cut along her right forearm that had bled and was already mostly dry. It needed cleaning and binding, but nothing more. He pulled out the small medical roll he kept in his belt pack. Let me. She looked at the roll, then at him, then held out her arm without further discussion. He cleaned the cut and wrapped it with a clean strip of linen, tying it off neatly, and she watched his hands the whole time with an expression that was hard to read but attentive in a way that felt specific to him rather than the task. You are faster than you look, she said. Everyone says that, he said, and finished the knot. They made Varan on the 4th day, coming over the last hill in the late afternoon with the river valley spread below them. The city itself was not large, but it was prosperous, a market town built where 2 trading roads crossed, with a stone bridge over the southern branch of the Greyvane and a market square large enough to hold a small festival. They drove in through the gate with the satisfaction of people who had earned their arrival. Dross paid them at the market road inn, and then went off to manage his merchandise, and the guards dispersed in the way that guards do at the end of a run toward food, toward drink, toward their own separate business. Abel stood in the inn yard with his travel pack over one shoulder and no particular plan for the next 3 days, which was the usual gap between runs. Murbul came out of the inn behind him. She had her full kit on hatchets, blade, mail vest, the works. She looked like what she was, a warrior who had been on the road for a long time and knew better than to be anything less than prepared. What will you do? He asked. She was quiet for a moment. Find out if anyone in this city is connected to the men who put the blood price on me, she said. If I can get a message north through the right channels, there is a clan elder in Droskin who does not like Gret's killers any more than I do. She has been waiting for testimony from someone outside the clan's direct reach. That is complicated, he said. It has been 9 months, she said. I am tired of running. He understood that with a directness that surprised him. He had been running from something for 3 years, not a blood price, but a version of himself that he had left behind when the debts came due and the farm was gone. He did not say this. I have 3 days, he said. I know a records factor in Varan who handles Highland clan correspondence. If you want, I can make an introduction. She looked at him with those amber eyes. Why, she said, not suspicious exactly, genuinely asking. Because you are trying to do the right thing, he said, and the right thing is harder to do alone. The silence stretched long enough that he thought she was going to decline. All right, she said finally. Show me this records factor. The records factor was a small, precise woman named Sira Dalt, who operated from a shop that smelled of dust and ink, and the particular dried herbs she used to preserve old documents. She was not surprised by either of them. She had seen stranger partnerships walk through her door, she said, and she agreed that for a reasonable fee she could get a sealed correspondence north to the elder in Droskin within 2 weeks, delivered through a merchant chain she trusted. Murbul dictated and Sira wrote, and Abel sat in the corner and read nothing because it was not his business, and afterward Murbul paid Sira an exact coin and shook her hand with the directness of a woman who respected work well done. On the street outside, she stopped and turned to look at him. That is the most progress I have made in 9 months, she said. Sira is reliable, he said. It is not only Sira, she said. Then she paused like she was deciding something and then decided it. There is an Orcish bathhouse on the east side of this market, she said, run by a clan family from the highlands. It is good, you should come. He blinked. To the bathhouse. You have been on the road for 4 days, she said. You smell like horse. This was objectively true. All right, he said. The Orcish bathhouse was a revelation. A series of rooms built into a hillside, with steaming water drawn from a mineral spring, tended by a quietly efficient family of 4 who recognized Murbul's clan markings with a respectful nod, and set them up in adjoining stone-walled rooms with wooden screens between. Abel lay in hot water up to his chin, and felt 3 days of road dirt and tension leave his body in a long, slow exhale. After a while, Murbul's voice came from the other side of the screen, unhurried and oddly companionable. You were in the road before you were a guard, she said. It was not a question exactly. Farm work, he said. Then the farm was gone and I needed something that paid. Dross hired me for a one-off run and then kept hiring me back. Do you miss the farm? He thought about it honestly. I miss the idea of it, he said. I miss having a thing that was mine, not the actual work necessarily, the having. She was quiet for a moment. I had a place like that, she said. In the highlands, before I left, a pause. I do not miss running, but I miss the certainty of having somewhere to be. You will get it back, he said. You do not know that. No, he said. But you are not the kind of person who gives up on things, and you have already done more in this city to fix it than you did in 9 months of running. So, another silence, longer this time. I keep expecting you to want something, she said, for all of this. I know, he said. I can tell. Most men do. Most men are idiots, he said. She laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. Not a polite acknowledgement or a restrained exhale, but an actual laugh, low and warm and startled out of her. He thought it was one of the best sounds he had heard in 3 years. They ate dinner that night at a highland Orcish cookstall in the market, spiced meat on flatbread, dense and good, with a sauce that made his eyes water, and that he ate anyway, because she was watching him with a gleam of challenge in her eyes. They sat on a low stone wall by the market fountain and ate in the cooling evening air, and she told him things about Orcish cuisine and highland food traditions that he had never known, and he told her about a riverfish the valley farmers prepared with vinegar and herbs that she had apparently never encountered, and it was the most comfortable conversation he had had in longer than he wanted to admit. She was looking at the market when she said quietly, I did not expect to like you. He was looking at the market too. I get that a lot, he said. No, you do not, she said. You are not the type that people have strong feelings about in either direction. They overlook you. She paused. I almost did. He turned to look at her. She was still looking at the market, but there was something careful and deliberate in the way she was not looking at him, and he understood it. Almost, he said. She turned then, and their eyes met in the warm lamplight of the market stalls, and the thing that had been building for 4 days stretched between them like a rope pulled taut. She reached out and put her fingers against the line of his jaw. It was a specific, deliberate touch, not tentative, not accidental. Warm green fingers against his skin, and her amber eyes holding his with a directness that made everything in him go very, very quiet. You returned things to me that I had given up for gone, she said, not just the weapons. He did not pretend not to understand her. Murbul, he said. I know, she said. I know this is not, she started over. I do not do this. I do not reach for things I cannot keep. What makes you think you cannot keep it, he said. She looked at him. He looked back. The market went on around them, indifferent and bright. He put his hand over hers, where it still rested against his jaw, and held it there. She breathed out slowly. I still have a blood price on my head, she said. I know. I am still dangerous to be near. I know that too, he said. I have been on the road long enough to know the difference between dangerous and not worth it. Something in her face changed, something that had been held for a very long time carefully, with the effort of someone who had learned not to let it show. It changed now, and it was the most honest thing he had seen in a very long time. She leaned forward and kissed him. Warm and deliberate, her hand still against his jaw in the lamplight of a Varan market stall, with the fountain running beside them and the cook stall smoke drifting past. He put his free hand at her waist and kissed her back with all the steady honesty he had. When they separated, she looked at him with the amber eyes at half range, close enough that he could see the carved lines on her tusks. "One night," she said. "That is all I can promise." "One night," he said, "is more than I have had in a long time." She took his hand. And one night was what they had, reckless and warm and honest in all the ways that neither of them had been with anyone in longer than they wanted to examine. He learned the geography of her strength and her softness. She learned that he was patient and that he paid attention and that he was braver about tenderness than she had expected. The night was long and the inn room was small and warm, and by the time the early gray light came under the door, something had been fundamentally rewritten in both of them that could not be undone and that neither of them was going to pretend otherwise. In the morning, she was still there. He had half expected her not to be. She was sitting at the small window with her braid redone and her hands wrapped around a cup of water from the pitcher on the table, looking at the pale street below with an expression that was complicated and serious. He sat up and watched her, and she heard him move and turned to look at him. "I am not running," she said. It was an answer to a question he had not asked yet. "I can see that," he said. "I need you to understand that this is not something I do," she said. "This is not how I am with people. I do not." She stopped, tried again. "You are not convenient for me." "No," he agreed. "You are not safe for me. Anything I care about becomes a leverage point." "I know," he said. "And you are the kind of person who will spend 9 months trying to survive a blood price because you told the truth about something that mattered, so I am not worried about your judgment." She looked at him for a long moment. "I am choosing to trust you," she said. "That is not a small thing." "I know it is not," he said. "I am choosing to trust you back." Another pause. Then she crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, her back straight, her amber eyes on his. "The blood price has to be resolved," she said. "Until it is, we cannot." "I understand," he said. "But in the meantime," she looked at him. "In the meantime," she said carefully, "I would not say no to company on the road." He smiled. She looked at the smile with an expression that was trying very hard to be sober and not entirely succeeding. "All right," she said. "Stop that." "I'm not doing anything," he said. "You have a very irritating smile," she said, and the corner of her mouth was betraying her completely. He stayed in Varan for the 3 days. She stayed too. They saw Sira Dalt again and confirmed the correspondence was sent. They walked the market together. She taught him what to look for in road provisions, and he showed her the supply stalls that gave the best weights for the price. And in the evenings they ate at the cook stall and talked about things that were not survival and blood prices and road politics. He told her about a farm he had loved in the valley, white-painted fence posts, and a pear tree by the window. She told him about the highland summer festivals where her clan would drive the cattle up to the high pasture and camp under the open sky for a week, and about the way the mountains looked in early light, gray and gold, like something that had forgotten to be afraid of anything. On the morning of the 4th day, Das sent word that the return caravan to Millhaven needed guards, and he came to find Abel at breakfast, and found Abel at a table with Murbul Mudborn, and he looked between them with the expression of a man doing arithmetic, and said he supposed she wanted the same rate for the return run. 10 marks, Murbul said. Dross made a pained noise and said 8.5, and she said 10, and he said 9, and she extended her hand at 9.5, and he shook it with the look of a man who knew he had made a reasonable deal, and was only unhappy because it was not unreasonable enough for him. The return road was a different thing. The Thornbacks were cleared, the marshal in Varan had been informed, and whatever had happened in the aftermath, the third pass was empty of threat when they came through it. The valley opened wide and green on the first day back, with the highland farms spread along the river and the smell of turned earth and new hay in the morning air, and Murbul rode beside him instead of at the rear. They had renegotiated without discussing it, both of them moving naturally into a paired front position, and the road unrolled ahead of them in the early light. She was different on this run. Not less guarded, exactly, but guarded about different things, less watchful of him, more willing to let the silence between them be comfortable rather than controlled. She pointed out a hawk circling above the valley farms and told him the Orcish word for that specific kind of hawk and what it meant in Highland clan symbolism. He told her about the farmers whose land they were passing, the Mill family who had been on the Greyvane for 4 generations, the younger couple who had bought the failing orchard plot and turned it into something that was beginning to work. She listened with genuine interest. They were 2 hours out of Millhaven when the rider came fast from the north. He was a young man on a foam-flecked horse, and he pulled up hard when he saw the caravan and shouted for Abel Hayes by name. Abel rode out to meet him, and the young man, it turned out he was a messenger from the Millhaven marshal's office, was breathing hard with urgency, and said something fast and confusing about 2 men in Millhaven who had arrived 4 days ago asking about an orc woman with clan markings from the Mudborn Highland clan. Abel asked how many. 2 that came in open, the messenger said. Could be more who did not come in open. The marshal wanted you to know because you came in with her on the last run and he thought. Abel said he understood and thanked the man and sent him back, and then he pulled his horse around and rode back to where Murbul had halted beside the lead wagon. She had seen the messenger. She had been watching the exchange. Her face was very still. How many? She said when he reached her. At least 2 in town, possibly more. She absorbed this with a stillness that was the functional equivalent of someone else running their hands through their hair and swearing. Then she straightened. They will be watching the road into town, she said. Yes. And they will know I am on this caravan, she said. They will have asked about road traffic. Probably, she looked at him. You should go ahead of the caravan. I will approach separately off-road, less reason to connect us. He looked back at her steadily. No, he said. She frowned. Abel, listen to me, he said. Arriving separately doesn't protect you, it isolates you. If they have numbers, they will take you on the approach and there will be no witnesses and the marshal can't do anything after the fact. We go in together in the caravan in the middle of the road in daylight. And if they move on me in the street, she said. Then we deal with it in the street, he said, in front of everyone. She looked at him for a long moment. He could see her working through it, the tactical logic, the risk assessment, the part of her that had been running alone for 9 months and found it very difficult to rely on another person's judgment over her own. You are sure, she said. I am sure, he said. Trust me. Another long moment. Then she nodded. They came into Millhaven at the height of the afternoon market. The square was at its fullest, every stall open, the ferry landing busy, the doubled axes yard full of horses and mules. The caravan rolled through the gate and into the square, and people moved to let them through, and heads turned the way they always did when a caravan arrived, because a caravan meant goods and goods meant business. Abel saw the 2 men almost immediately. They were not hiding exactly. They were standing on the north side of the square near the well, and they were watching the caravan's arrival with the focused, professional attention of people who had been paid to wait. Both were large, both Orcish hired clan warriors, Abel guessed, from the highland markings on their armor. The blood price had hired within the clan. That was not a good sign because it meant this was official rather than freelance. Murbul saw them at the same moment. He felt her sit forward on her horse beside him. One of the warriors moved into the square. He shouted Murbul's name in Orcish and then in common, loudly enough that the market slowed and turned. He said the blood price. He named the crime witness against the clan, betrayal of clan truth, in the formal phrasing that made it an official declaration. He was invoking the right of clan collection in a human town, which was legally murky at best, but the declaration alone was enough to make things very complicated. The market square went very quiet. Every face in the square turned to look at Murbul. Abel could feel the weight of it, the town's collective attention, half curious and half hostile, the calculation of 200 people doing the arithmetic of whether this was their problem, and deciding mostly that it was not, and therefore it was going to be a problem for her. Then the crowd started to shift. Not running, just repositioning. Moving away from the space around her, opening a corridor that was clearly meant to isolate her, to create room for whatever came next. 2 more men appeared from the alley beside the butcher's stall. 4 in total then. Murbul's hand moved to her hatchet. Abel dismounted. He walked his horse to the rail at the edge of the square, tied it deliberately, and then walked back into the square and stood beside her. In front of her, between her and the approaching warrior. The warrior stopped. Abel was aware of how this looked. He was a medium-height human man in road-worn leather and a 3-day beard, standing in front of an Orcish blood price collector in the middle of Millhaven's market square. He was objectively the less frightening thing in this picture by a significant margin. "This woman is under caravan contract," he said. His voice carried clearly in the quiet square. "Contracted to Pel Dross Caravan and Transport, Millhaven registered. That contract is active and she is returning from a run. Anything you want to do to her, you are going to have to do to a registered caravan guard in a registered contract town in front of witnesses in daylight." He paused. "I recommend considering what the Millhaven marshal thinks about Highland clan blood prices being collected in his square." The warrior stared at him. There was a silence that lasted approximately 1 year. "Step aside," the warrior said, in common so the crowd could hear. "No," Abel said, simple as that. From the back of the crowd, someone else's voice. "He is right about the contract law." That was Dross, coming forward through the crowd, his ledger under his arm, looking deeply unhappy about being involved in this, but clearly having decided that his investment required defense. "Active contract. Town law applies." The square held its breath. The warrior looked at Abel. He looked at Murbul behind him. He looked at the marshal's office, whose door had just opened, and at the marshal himself, a short, solid man named Toke, who was descending the steps with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who wanted to make clear he was watching this very carefully. The warrior looked back at Abel. "You are choosing a side," he said. "There are consequences." "I know," Abel said. "You are choosing her." "I am choosing what is right," he said. "She did not." The warrior held his gaze for another long moment. Then he looked at his 3 companions. Something passed between them silently. They stepped back. The warrior said something in Orcish, short, sharp, clearly a final statement of some kind. And then all 4 of them walked out of the square and toward the north road, and the market square watched them go, and then breathed out all at once like a single enormous organism, and the noise came back up in a wave. Abel did not move until they were out of sight. Then he turned around. Murbul was standing behind him, and her expression was something he had never quite seen on her face before, not soft, exactly, but stripped of all the careful engineering. She was looking at him the way he had never been looked at by anyone in his entire life, like he was something that mattered in a very specific and irreplaceable way. "Abel," she said. "You all right?" he said. She looked at him for one more moment. And then she stepped forward and put her arms around him, in the middle of Millhaven's market square with 200 people watching, and she held on with the contained ferocity of someone who had been very, very alone for a very long time and had just discovered they did not have to be. He held on back. He was aware of the crowd. He did not care about the crowd at all. Marshal Toke came over presently and said something procedural about caravan law and blood prices and highland jurisdiction, which Abel answered with appropriate specificity while Murbul stood beside him and let him handle it, which was the clearest sign he had yet that she trusted him in a way that went past tactics. That evening in his room above the doubled axe, she sat on the edge of the bed and said, "You are in the blood price now. You stood against the collector. That makes you a target." "I know," he said. "You should have let me handle it." "You would have handled it by fighting 4 armed men in a crowded square," he said. "That could have ended many ways, not all of them good. I have handled worse odds." "I know that too," he said. "But it occurred to me that you have been fighting alone for 9 months, and you did not have to fight alone today." She was quiet. Her amber eyes were on his hands, which were resting on the table, ordinary and unhurried. "You are not afraid of the blood price," she said. "I am moderately afraid of it," he said, "but I am more afraid of the version of things where I did nothing." She looked up at him. "Why?" "Because of you," he said simply. "Because you matter." The silence in the room was very full. Outside, the doubled axe's evening noise was building voices, the fiddler, the clunk of cups. None of it reached them. "I have never had someone stand in front of me," she said. It was a very quiet thing to say, and it cost her something. He stood up and crossed to the bed and sat beside her, their shoulders touching. "You will," he said, "every time if you will let me." She turned to look at him. She was very close. The carved lines on her tusks were inches from his face, and her amber eyes were gold in the lamplight, and the hard-won softness in her expression was the most beautiful thing he had seen in his life. She kissed him, deliberate and warm and completely chosen. He kissed her back. Whatever she had said about not reaching for things she could not keep, she was reaching now, and he was already there. The response from Droskin came in 12 days. Sir Adalt sent a rider to Millhaven with a sealed document and a note that said simply, "The elder Vecca is moving." Abel brought the document to Murbul, where she was sharpening a hatchet on a whetstone by the river, and she read it twice, and then she sat very still for a long moment. "Vecca has 3 witnesses of her own," she said. 2 of the young warriors who saw what happened to Gret and were too frightened to speak at the time. They were willing to speak to an elder outside the killer's influence, it seems. She paused. "Vecca is bringing formal charges before the Highland Clan Council. Full council. Not just the local elders." Another pause. "If the council upholds the charges, the blood price is voided. The killers face their own price." Abel sat beside her on the bank. The Greyvane ran past them, cold and unhurried. "How long does a council decision take?" he asked. "Weeks, possibly months. The Highland Clan Council meets at the summer solstice and the winter one. Vecca will call an emergency session, but they are slow to call those." "So you wait," he said. "I wait," she said, "and I stay visible. If I disappear, they can claim I ran from judgment. Vecca says I need to be reachable and present." She looked at him sidelong. "In Millhaven, apparently." He looked at the river. He was thinking about the logistics of it, whether Dross would keep her on regular runs, whether the 4 men who had been in the square were gone for good, or whether they would send more, whether the town would tolerate an orc woman who intended to stay. "I will talk to Dross," he said. "Steady work for the season, both of us on the valley runs. Millhaven as home base." "Home base," she said, trying out the phrase. "Unless you have somewhere better to be." She looked at him. "No," she said, "I do not." And so they stayed. The weeks took on a rhythm. Caravan runs on the Greyvane Road, the valley farms and mill crossings and ferry stops. The work was steady and the pay was reliable, and they were good at it, the 2 of them together, in a way that was more than the sum of 2 capable people. She saw things he would miss. He read situations she might cut through rather than step around. The other guards adjusted, cord, after several pointed demonstrations of Murbul's competence, became something almost like an ally, which Murbul tolerated with amused dignity. Dross took to booking them as a pair rather than separately, which he justified on efficiency grounds and which served his own interests but was also true. Millhaven adjusted more slowly, the way that hard towns adjust to anything they did not choose. Marit at the doubled axe remained professionally neutral. She never refused Murbul's service, and over time the neutrality softened at the edges. The merchants at the market stalls went through cycles of unease and accommodation. The ferry workers were largely indifferent, which was the most useful attitude of all. There were incidents. A group of drunk farmhands who made a night of shouting outside the doubled axe, which Murbul ignored with a composure that Abel found genuinely impressive, and which she described afterward as not worth the paperwork. A market dispute where a vendor tried to refuse her a sale, and Abel stood beside her with the specific patience of a man who was going to wait this out for as long as it took, until the vendor concluded that the sale was going to happen regardless, and his dignity was better served by conducting it normally. There were also the things that the town chose to accept more easily than expected. She fixed the millwright's wheel when the millwright's own apprentice had given up on it. She had the strength and the mechanical sense, and she did it in 20 minutes, and the millwright paid her and thanked her and told his wife, and the wife told the market, and the market filed it away. She pulled a child out of the Greyvane shallows one afternoon when the child fell from the ferry platform, moving fast and sure and handing the soaking child to its mother with a matter-of-fact gentleness that the mother clearly had not expected and could not dismiss once she had seen it. The town filed that away too. Abel watched all of it and said almost nothing, because the most useful thing he could do was be steady and present and let it accumulate. In the evenings, in the room above the doubled axe or on the bank of the Greyvane with their boots off and their feet in the shallows, and the summer light going long and amber across the water, they talked. They talked about everything: the road, the valley, the highland mountains, the small wooden box from the cache, which she finally told him about. It held a piece of polished red river stone from her homeland and a folded drawing, charcoal on hide, of the highland peaks seen from her mother's farm. She showed him both, and the way she held the drawing, very carefully, like paper that had been folded and unfolded too many times, and needed to know someone was paying attention, made him understand something about her that all the words would have circled around without landing. He told her about the farm, his father's farm, the pear tree and the fence posts and the things he had buried under the barn floor and left when the debts came due. He had not said all of this to anyone. The words came out steady and unhurried, and she listened with the full weight of her attention, and when he finished she said simply, "Those things are still there, under the barn floor." "If the barn is still standing," he said. "Barns are sturdy," she said. And then, after a pause, "When this is done, when Vecca gets the council decision, we could go look." He looked at her. "It is 3 days north of Millhaven," he said, "in a direction I have not been for 6 years. "I know," she said. "I am still saying we could go. We." She said it without drama, without calling attention to it, but it was completely deliberate. He had noticed the way she chose her words very carefully, never accidentally, and this one was chosen. He picked up her hand where it was resting on the bank between them and held it, her broad green fingers in both his. She let him. "Yeah," he said. "We could do that." She looked at him. The amber eyes were warm and steady. "I am choosing you," she said. "I want to be clear about that. Not because you stood in front of me in the square, not because you returned my things, not because it is convenient. I am choosing you because you are the person I want to be on the road with." "Murbul," he said. "I am being clear," she said, "because I was not clear before and I should have been. I kept calling it one night or in the meantime as though I was managing expectations. I was not managing yours, I was managing my own. I was frightened of wanting something and then losing it." "You are still frightened," he said. "Yes," she said, "but I am choosing it anyway." She looked at him with the amber eyes in the low light. "You should know what you are getting into. A powerful, infuriating, remarkable woman who is better at almost everything than I am and who has the worst timing for personal conversations I have ever encountered," he said. She looked at him. "Your worst timing is right now," she said. "I know," he said, "but I am choosing it anyway." She stared at him. Then she made a sound that was half a laugh and half something else, and pulled him in by the front of his shirt, and kissed him in the amber light of the Greyvane evening, with the river running cool past their feet and the summer air warm around them. And it was the most uncomplicated moment he had had in 6 years, and he held on to it with both hands. The council decision came with the first breath of autumn. A rider arrived at the doubled axe with sealed documents bearing the Highland clan council's mark, the formal wax stamp that meant full council authority, not just a local elder's word. Abel was there when Murbul broke the seal, sitting across the table with his hands wrapped around a morning cup, watching her face. She read it. She read it again. She set it down on the table very carefully. "The blood price is voided," she said. Her voice was level. "The killers, all 3 of them, are charged before the full council with Gret's death, and with false accusation against a clan witness." Elder Vecca called the emergency session and got the quorum. A pause. They are being recalled to the highland. The council will hold formal judgment at the winter solstice." He watched her. She was sitting very still, and her face was doing the thing where it was working very hard to be composed while something fundamental was happening underneath. "Murbul," he said. She looked up. "You did it," he said. She breathed out. It was a long, deep, slow breath, and when it finished she looked different, not lighter, exactly, but unburdened. Like something that had been pressing on her for 9 months had finally been set down in the right place. "Vecca did most of it," she said. "Vecca had 2 frightened witnesses," he said. "You had the testimony that made those witnesses possible. You told the truth when it would have been much easier not to, and you kept telling it for 9 months in a row while people were trying to kill you for it." She looked at him. She blinked once slowly. "Come here," he said. She came around the table and he stood, and she put her face against his shoulder and he held her. She did not cry. She was not built for crying easily, and he did not expect it. But the way she held on said everything that crying would have said, and he held her back with both arms and let the moment be as large as it needed to be. After a while she straightened and stepped back and looked at him with the amber eyes that were very bright and completely serious. "I want to go north," she said, "to testify in person at the Winter Solstice Council. Vecca says it would strengthen the formal judgment." "Then we go north," he said. She looked at him. "It is highland Orcish territory. You would be a human who is under contract to a highlander, which makes me a protected guest," he said. Vecca's correspondence made that clear. He had read the correspondence. He had read most things that affected both of them at her invitation. "And I have 3 years of Greyvane road work and a marshal's reference and a very good crossbow." She tilted her head. "You really did read all of it?" "Every word," he said. "That is going to be a habit with you," she said, but the corner of her mouth was doing the thing that meant she did not mind. They gave Das 2 weeks' notice, which Das received with the pained expression of a man who had been expecting it and had not finished resigning himself. He paid them fairly for the full season's work, added a bonus that he described as a hazard supplement but which was large enough to suggest gratitude, and told them that if they came back through on the southern runs, he would hire them without discussion. The night before they left, Merritt at the Doubled Axe put a hot meal in front of each of them without being asked. The good mutton, not the stew, and set 2 cups of the dark river ale on the table, and said nothing beyond that it was on the house. Abel thanked her. Murbul thanked her. Merritt looked at both of them with an expression that was professional composure doing its best to conceal something warmer, and went back to her bar. Cord came in while they were eating and sat down uninvited and drank half a cup of something pale and said, without looking directly at either of them, that the valley road was going to be less interesting without them, and then finished his cup and left. Murbul watched him go and said to Abel very quietly, "I think that was an apology." "It was definitely an apology," he said. "Humans are strange," she said. "We try," he said. They left at first light on the northern road, their horses loaded with what they needed, everything else either sold or left behind. The morning was cool and sharp, with the first edge of autumn in it, and the mist was thick in the valley bottom, and the highland road climbed up through it into clear sky above. Millhaven fell away behind them as they climbed, and Abel did not look back for a while, and when he did it was smaller than expected and briefly, unexpectedly dear. The stone bridge over the Greyvane, the market square, the sign of the Doubled Axe visible from this height, the ferry rope stretched across the water. He had spent 3 years on this road and eaten 100 meals in that common room and slept 100 nights above it, and he had thought of it as a stopping point, never a home. It was not a home. It was something. Murbul was watching him when he looked forward again. "All right," she said. "Yeah," he said, "just looking." She looked back down the valley too for a moment, and something in her expression was the highland Orcish word for that hawk, the carrying away of things. She turned back to the road. "Your farm," she said. "Is it north of Millhaven or east?" "North," he said. "A day and a half maybe before we hit the highland road proper." "We have time," she said. They had time. The farm was there. Not his father's any more. It had been sold twice since then, and the current owners were a young couple, the Pell family, who did not know him from anyone on the road and had no reason to let strangers dig under their barn floor. But they were decent people, and Murbul explained the situation with a directness that landed better than Abel expected. And the woman of the house said that they had found a wrapped bundle under the floor when they replaced a rotten board 2 seasons ago, and had not known what it was, and it was in the back of the storage room. The bundle was there. The tools were there, his good draw-knife, his father's plane, the small iron horse figure he had carved at 14 and been unaccountably attached to. They were dry. The oilcloth had held. He stood in the Pell family's yard with the bundle open in his hands, and he did not say anything for a long moment because the things in his hands were young and the hands holding them were not. Murbul stood beside him. She did not say anything either. She put one hand on the back of his neck, warm and steady, and he leaned into it just slightly. "Thank you," he said, "to the air or the farm or something." "Thank the Pells," she said. He thanked the Pells. He left them a good iron from his kit in exchange, because something needed to balance. The Pell woman looked at the iron and looked at both of them and said that travelers were welcome back any time. On the Highland road, 3 days north, the mountains came into view, and Murbul sat straighter on her horse, and her amber eyes went to the peaks with an expression that had nothing guarded in it at all. It was pure and uncomplicated, the way a person looks at the thing they belong to. "There," she said. "Those are your mountains," he said. "The gray ones with the snow on the far shoulder," she said. "My mother's farm is a day below the ridge line on the eastern slope." He looked at them. They were vast and cold and lit with the late afternoon light in a way that made them look like something that remembered being young when everything else was not yet. "They are extraordinary," he said. "Yes," she said. "They are." They rode toward them. The highland territory was different from the valley in every way, colder, wilder, the road less a road than a track that knew where it was going and did not feel obliged to argue about it. The farms were high and spare and tough. The people were spare and tough too, and they looked at Abel with the particular consideration of a people that did not see many humans this far north. But they looked at Murbul with recognition, and more than once with respect, because her clan markings were known, and Elder Vecca had sent word ahead. Vecca herself met them 2 days from the Highland Council seat. A small, wiry orc woman of considerable age, who had the bearing of someone who had made important decisions for a very long time, and found the weight of them entirely manageable. She looked at Abel with assessing intelligence, and he looked back at her with the steady, honest patience that was the most useful thing about him, and she said something in Orcish to Murbul. Murbul said something back. Abel caught one word that he had learned in the past weeks from Murbul's occasional teaching, the word for chosen, not bonded or allied or contracted. Chosen. Vecca looked at him again. She said something in Orcish that had a rising inflection at the end, clearly a question, and then looked at Murbul. Murbul said something in response, short and definitive. Vecca looked at Abel one more time, and then she nodded at him with the inclination of someone who had reached a decision. It was a small nod, but it felt significant in the way that small things feel significant when the person making them has weight. "She asked if you know what you're taking on," Murbul said later as they set up camp in the Highland shelter. "And you said," he said. "I said that you do," she said, "and that you are good at things that seem more complicated than they are." He looked at her. "That is either a compliment or an insult." "It is a fact," she said. "Vecca appreciates facts." What else did she say? Murbul was quiet for a moment, arranging the fire. Then she said that a human who stands in front of a clan collector in a town square for an orc woman is either foolish or worth keeping. She did not look at him. She said I should decide which. "And," he said. She looked at him across the fire. "I decided months ago," she said. The Winter Solstice Council was 3 days of formal process that Abel followed in outline, because Murbul translated the key moments, whispering in his ear in the cold hall where the Highland Clan Council sat, a large round space with a stone floor and a central fire, and ranked seating for the representative elders of 14 clans. He had been granted observer status through Vecca's sponsorship, and he sat in the observers section with 2 highland traders and a highland clan human wife of 30 years standing who helped him navigate the etiquette. Murbul testified on the first day. She stood in the center of the hall and spoke for 3 hours in Orcish, in the formal testimony tradition that required no interruption once begun, and Abel could not follow most of it, but he watched her face and her bearing and the way the council watched her, and he saw the moment when the council's attention shifted from assessment to belief, subtle as a tide change, but real. On the second day, the 2 young warriors testified. On the third day, the killers who had been brought in under council compulsion tried to contest the account, and it became clear very quickly that 3 witnesses plus formal testimony plus the evidence Vecca had gathered was not a close thing. The judgment came at sunset on the third day. The chief elder read it aloud in Orcish and then in Common, for the record and for the human observers. Full charges sustained, blood price against Murbul Mudborn voided, killers sentenced to the clan's formal penalty exile and loss of clan standing, which in the Highland tradition was the equivalent of a legal death. Gret was formally honored. Murbul's testimony was entered into the clan record. It was done. She came to him in the observers' hall afterward. The formal session was closed and the hall was clearing, people in small clusters speaking in the low tones of significant things having happened. She walked through the thinning crowd and stopped in front of him, and he stood up from the bench. Her face was open in a way he had seen only a handful of times. Fully open, no engineering, nothing held back. "It is over," she said. "It is over," he said. She put her hands on either side of his face and kissed him, right there in the middle of the Highland Council Hall, in front of the departing elders and the traders and the council staff, in front of the Highland clan human wife of 30 years who made a small, warm sound of recognition. He kissed her back with both hands at her waist. Vecca, passing on her way to speak with the chief elder, paused and looked at them, and said something in Orcish with the tone of a woman who is not surprised by anything. The human wife of 30 years translated for him later. She had said, "Yes, that answers the question." They stayed in the Highlands through the deep winter. It was Murbul's decision, and he agreed to it without hesitation, because she had been away from her mountains for 9 months and she needed them back. They stayed in the clan guest house near Vecca's settlement, comfortable enough, if cold, and in the days they walked the highland paths and she showed him the mountain in all its winter moods. The gray early light, the way the snow lay in the high passes, the places where she had learned to hunt, and the ridge where the highland cattle had been driven up in summer. She showed him her mother's farm, which was being worked by a cousin now, and the cousin was glad to see her and showed her around the changes, and she walked through the rooms with her hand trailing along the door frames. She showed him the red river stone and the charcoal drawing, and she showed him where the river the stone came from ran below the farm in a fast cold channel between limestone banks. He picked up a stone of his own, a different shape, darker, and turned it in his hands. "River keep," she said. "That is what we call them. You carry a piece of the place you plan to come back to." He put the stone in his pocket. In the evenings they were in the small warmth of the guest house, and she taught him Orcish slowly, patiently, with the amused tolerance of someone who has decided this is worthwhile and is willing to wait for the results. He was terrible at the tones at first, and she corrected him with the directness of a woman who would rather be honest than kind about it, and he improved steadily, because improvement was a thing he was capable of when someone actually told him what needed to change. He was learning to say her name correctly, not the common speech flattening of Murbul that he had been using, but the Orcish version, where the R rolled slightly and the ol had a deeper resonance, and one evening he said it correctly without trying to, just in the middle of a sentence about something else, and she went very still and looked at him. "Again," she said. He said it again. He could tell from her expression that he had gotten it. Something in her face went very quiet and warm. "My mother used to say that a person's name spoken correctly is the first gift you can give someone," she said. He looked at her. Then I want to give it to you every day. She looked back at him for a long moment, and the fire was warm between them, and the highland winter pressed at the walls outside, and the world outside was vast and cold and old, and this was the small human and orc-sized warmth inside it, and it was enough. It was more than enough. She said his name in Orcish then, her own version of it, the sounds adapted for Orcish phonetics, and it was different and deeply personal, a name that only she would say to him in exactly that way. Mine, she said, in Orcish and then in common, both languages. Her amber eyes held his. Do you object? He looked at her. He thought about 3 years on the Greyvane road and 6 years before that on roads that went nowhere, and the farm under the debt load, and the things buried under the barn floor, and all the long, ordinary miles of being a person nobody looked at twice. He thought about an oilcloth bundle under a willow root. He thought about amber eyes and carved tusks and a laugh that had been startled out of her in a bathhouse in Varan, and a kiss in a market square lamplight, and a hand on the back of his neck in a farmyard in autumn. No, he said, I do not object. She reached for him and he reached back. They came down from the highlands in the first warmth of early spring, when the passes opened, and the highland roads began to carry traffic again. The journey south took a week at an unhurried pace. They were not running from anything or to anything on a deadline, for the first time in as long as either of them could remember, and the feeling of it was new and good. They camped where they wanted and pushed when the road was good and stopped when the light was beautiful. And she taught him more Orcish every evening, and he taught her the names of the valley birds she had not grown up knowing. They crossed back into the Greyvane Valley on a morning in early spring, with the river running high from the snowmelt and the valley farms just beginning to show the first pale green of the season's early shoots. The Highland Road came down to the Valley Road at a junction 3 miles north of Millhaven, and they turned south toward the town. Millhaven came into view over the last hill in the mid-morning, and it was exactly the same, the stone bridge, the market square, the doubled axe sign. The ferry was running. The market was set up. Everything was ordinary and familiar and ongoing, the way that towns are, not caring particularly whether anyone had been away. They came through the gate. People always noticed, in a crossing town, when new arrivals came, and there was the usual recalibration, as various people recognized Abel from the caravan work, and then registered who was beside him, and then put those 2 pieces of information together with other things they knew. Merritt was outside the doubled axe doing something with a barrel when they came down the main road. She looked up, saw them, and her expression went through several things in quick succession, landing finally on something that was neither surprise nor its opposite but was somewhere in the territory of things making sense. Hayes, she said. Merritt, he said. He paused. You have rooms. She looked at him, she looked at Murbul, she wiped her hands on her apron. I have a larger room on the 2nd floor that just came open, she said. Better window, river view, a pause. It is more than the single. That is fine, he said. She nodded once. Come in when you are ready, she said, and went back to the barrel. The market square was busy. They rode through it and people looked, the way people always looked, and the looks were various, some cautious, some curious, some blank, and some, from the people who had been there in the square 3 months ago, who had watched a medium-height human caravan guard stand between a blood price collector and an orc woman carrying a different quality. Not warmth, necessarily, but acknowledgement. The recognition of something that had happened and had not been undone. The millwright was in the market. He saw Murbul and raised a hand. She raised one back, a brief, serious nod. The woman whose child she had pulled from the river was at the fruit stall. She looked across the square and Murbul looked back and the woman gave a small, certain inclination of her head. Cord was at the doubled axe's yard doing something with a saddle. He looked up when they rode in. You're back, he said. We are back, Abel said. Cord looked at both of them and then back at Abel with an expression that combined a complete absence of surprise with a species of grudging satisfaction. Dross asked about you last week, he said. Said there's a southern run in 10 days. We'll talk to him, Abel said. Cord nodded. He went back to the saddle, and then after a moment he said, without looking up, "Good to have you back." Murbul dismounted beside Abel and handed her horse's reins to the stable boy. She stood in the yard of the doubled axe and looked at the town around her, the market, the bridge, the river, the people, the ordinary morning business of a crossing town in the first warmth of spring. She looked at Abel. "This is not the highlands," she said. "No," he said. "It is not. It is not where I am from." "No," he agreed. She looked at the Greyvane running below the bridge, and at the market square where the season's first buyers were haggling over prices, and at the doubled axe's sign, which had been repaired again since the autumn and was slightly straighter than before. "It is where the road is," she said. "It is where this road is," he said. "There are others," she looked at him. "This one has a good ferry crossing," she said, "and a reliable caravan master, and a river that sounds right at night." She paused. "And you?" "And me," he said. She put her arm through his, which was not an Orcish gesture particularly, and not a human one either, but was simply hers, a choice, like all her choices, deliberate and clear. "Let us get the room with the river view," she said. He covered her hand with his. "Yeah," he said, "let us do that." They walked into the doubled axe together, and the door swung shut behind them, and the Greyvane ran on below the bridge, and the market square made its morning noise, and the crossing town went about its business the way crossing towns do, with one eye on the road and the other on the river, watching for whatever comes next. What came next, for Abel Hayes and Murbul Mudborn, was the southern run in 10 days, and after that the northern loop in early summer, and the full season of the Greyvane Valley roads that they worked together with the easy coordination of two people who had found the right partner for the road they were actually traveling. Dross gave them his most reliable wagon and his most complicated cargo with equal confidence, and the crossing towns along the route slowly accumulated the same understanding that Millhaven had reached, that this was a caravan pair worth knowing, worth trusting, worth the extra toll on the good roads. Murbul kept the small wooden box in her pack, and she had added Abel's dark river stone to it, the Highland clan custom of river keep, extended now to the Greyvane stone as well as her own mountains. She showed him once the two stones side by side, his and hers, and did not need to explain what it meant. He understood. He had understood for a while. He bought a length of red cord at a Highland market stall in the summer and asked her, one evening on the bank of the Greyvane in the last long light of the season's best day, what she knew about Orcish cord binding. She looked at the cord in his hands and then looked at his face for a long, searching moment. "It is serious," she said. "In the Highlands it is final." "I know," he said. "You would be mine," she said, formally, in the clan tradition. "I would be yours," he said. She held his gaze. "And I would be yours," she said. "That is also how it works." "I know," he said again. "That is the part I am asking about." She was quiet for a moment that stretched and stretched. The river ran past them. The light was amber and warm. A hawk turned in the sky above the valley, the kind she had named for him in the Orcish way. She took the cord from his hands. She took his right hand and her own right hand and wrapped the cord around both of them once, twice, 3 times, the way she had seen it done in her homeland. Her hands were steady and certain. His were steady too. She said the words in Orcish, which he had been practicing for 3 weeks in the evenings when she thought he was reviewing the road ledger, and he said them back to her correctly, every tone, every resonance, and the expression on her face when he said them in her language was the most exact and total thing he had ever seen. The cord was red, bright in the amber light. The river ran. He was someone who had been looked past for so long that he had stopped expecting otherwise, and she was someone who had been running for so long that she had stopped expecting to stop. They had both been wrong. She put her free hand against his face, the way she had done the first time, on a market wall in a city that felt a long way away now, and her amber eyes were gold in the light, and she said one more word in Orcish that he knew because she had taught it to him deliberately in the last weeks, in the way you teach someone a word you want them to be ready to hear. Home. He put his hand over hers, both of them still bound together with the red cord between. "Home," he said back. And above them the hawk turned in the evening sky over the Greyvane Valley, and the light went long and warm across the river, and the crossing town made its ordinary sounds below, and the road lay ahead of them in every direction, north to the highlands and south to the coast and east and west along the valley, and every one of them was open and good and theirs to choose. They chose together. They always would.